I watched Trump's meeting with Carney today, so you don't have to, and here's my overview, and let me just tell you right now, you're going to want to go ahead and just touch some grass before I start this. Everything I'm going to tell you, he said in less than 35 minutes, and he also mentioned Biden 3 times in that 35 minutes. Regarding Palestine, he says, depending on how you count, it could be 3,000 years or it could be 500 years. And he says the proposal he put forward is going to apply to more than the Gaza situation. And then this is a direct quote, literally every country in the world has supported the plan. Right at the beginning, too, he just casually suggests to the Prime Minister of Canada that Canada should just join the U.S. They literally spoke for less than 3 minutes, and then Trump goes, okay, any questions? And I literally put in my notes, here we go. He gets asked whether federal workers should receive back pay from the shutdown. He says that Democrats have put people in a very bad position. He also says there are some people who deserve to be taken care of and we're going to take care of them. And there are others who don't deserve to be taken care of and we're going to take care of them in a different way. Then later he's asked, literally, this is the law that you have to back pay them. And he says this direct quote, I follow the law and what the law says is correct. I follow the law. He has 34 felonies. He says multiple times that there is natural conflict between the US and Canada, and he says the reason for that is they want steel, we want steel. They want car companies, we want car companies. Carney later says that it's competition, which is how I would also describe that. A reporter brings up the fact that Canadians aren't coming to the US anymore. There's been a 23% reduction and says, what are you going to do about that? And he says, Americans don't want cars made in Canada. So he definitely did not understand the question. He mentions the $17 trillion in investment again, and then says that that was actually months ago and it's probably much higher now. I'm just going to remind you on whitehouse.gov, it still shows 8.8 trillion, and I fact checked that number and shown that it's complete BS. He then says that Biden is the worst president in the history of America. And then he says that the $17 trillion is really going to be 21, 22 trillion when everything's all added up. And he says, if you did $1 trillion in a year, that's pretty good. And we're going to do over 20 trillion. And everything I just told you was also an answer to the question, what are you going to do about Canadians not wanting to travel into the US? He says there's been 50 murders in Chicago over the last 5, 6, 7 months. He does not clarify whether it was 5, 6, or 7 months. He then says that the mayor of Chicago has a 4% approval rating. He says that when he got to DC, it was a raging hellhole. His exact words, a raging hellhole, and now there is no crime. And then he mentions open borders again that Joe Biden had and says that open borders affected Canada as well. Because apparently, I guess people are coming in from Mexico, going all the way through the US without ever being intercepted or anything, and then going into Canada with also not being intercepted when crossing the border. He says again that for 4 months, no one has entered this country illegally. He doesn't say it came from a left group this time, but I read an article on whitehouse.gov again this morning that said that 9,000 people per month are entering the country illegally. So he again is directly contradicting what is on whitehouse.gov. He said this before, but he says the drugs coming in by boat, they call them water drugs. And now there's not any more boats left in the ocean because he keeps taking them out. He also says that 100,000 Americans have been saved by a result of him taking out those boats. And that actually tracks because he says that 25,000 are saved each time he extrajudicially kills people on a boat. And he said last time he spoke that he's taken out 4 of the boats. So at least there's some math he's able to do correctly. This is just what happens when this man speaks without a teleprompter. It just gets bonkers immediately. He says Chicago is a great city, but you can't have a great city if you have murders, and they have murders. He also gives this direct quote, which is pretty close to that one. He says, to have a great country, you can't have crime. And we don't have crime. We have cities where there is tremendous crime. Direct quote. Because every accusation is an admission, he says that Democrats are like insurrectionists. He also then is talking about the big, beautiful bill and says it was such a great bill that we never need another bill ever. I guess for anything. A reporter asked Carney, why is it that the EU and the UK have been able to reduce the tariffs that Trump initially put on, but you've been unable to? And he immediately jumps in and says, it's because they're located literally right next to us. He forgets that he signed the USMCA in his first term. He also will later give a quote in the speech that makes it very clear that he forgets that he was president from 2017 to 2021. I'm going to remind you of 2 things before I go over this section because it doesn't make any sense the way he says this, but it is what he says, so I do have to cover it. 1, a tariff is paid by the citizens of the country who pay the tariff. And 2, anything over a 100% tariff, if they work the way Donald Trump says, makes absolutely no sense. Because if another country was paying a tariff and you put that tariff at 100%, say that country was trying to sell a $10,000 car into the US. In order to do that, they would have to pay the US government $10,000 in order to sell that car for $10,000 in the US, which would mean there is literally no way they could ever make any money. Okay, we'll go into what he said. He says when looking at agricultural products into Canada that they have tariffs tariffs of 250, 300, and even 401%. He then also says that we have been charged tariffs, which, as we just went over, is completely untrue. And he says that we are the king of being screwed by tariffs. He then also incorrectly states that almost every country charged the US and we didn't charge them because we were led by stupid people. And then he blames past presidents and past business leaders. He was both a past president and a past business leader. He just completely forgets that he was president. And then he says that the US has been paying trillions and trillions of dollars and other countries have been paying nothing because, again, he does not understand how a tariff works. He makes a claim that before he started his second term, the U.S. was not allowed to sell cars in Europe, and the U.S. was also not allowed to sell agricultural products in Europe, but now they totally can. He also says that he claims that Germany had 0 cars imported from the U.S. I'm just going to remind you, it was 20,000 plus cars in 2023 from the U.S. to Germany. He also claims that Japan had 0 cars come in from the U.S. It was 29,000 in 2023. He claims that Democrats want open borders, men and women's sports. He tries to say transgender for everyone, but says transgender from everybody, which is weird. And then he says that Democrats want windmills all over the place. And he says if we kept that up for the next couple of years, we probably wouldn't have a country anymore. We're at the 6-minute mark, so I'm just going to take the opportunity right now to remind you that he is doing all of this, complaining about his own personal grievances, while he is sitting next to the Prime Minister of Canada. He is sitting next to another world leader and complaining about his own personal grievances. Okay, he says that Democrats not voting to open up the government is like a kamikaze attack. He doesn't really explain how. He says that tens of millions of people have been killed in the Middle East, but he does not give a time frame for that. So I'm guessing he's talking about somewhere in the 500 to 3,000 years of fighting that he was talking about before. Again, I don't know. He's not very specific with his numbers. So it's just tens of millions, which in my opinion is at least 20 million because it's not 10 million, it's tens of millions. But again, this is just me using logic, and I know that that doesn't work when trying to decipher what this man is saying. But you are welcome for the translation I'm giving you. He says Canada is doing much better, but that the fentanyl crisis will never be over. Just never. And then the next thing he says is that the delays at airports are Democrat delays. He calls Jasmine Crockett a low IQ individual, which is just hilarious. He then says that AOC has no right to negotiate on this funding bill at all. He then says that Republicans have great people and great policy. And then he says, quote, "We're not going to take your child away and change the sex of your child." He literally doesn't know the difference between sex and gender. Guys, I know you're just not going to believe this one, but he says that a year ago we were a dead country and now we're the hottest country anywhere in the world. And he says that Mark Carney hasn't told him that yet, but he hopes that he will soon. He claims again that over $20 trillion of investment has come into the U.S. since he's been in office. Since he's been in office, he's claimed 13 trillion, 15 trillion, 16 trillion, 17 trillion. Now 20, 21, and 22 trillion were all said during this speech. After he says that due to the shutdown, they are going to permanently close a bunch of programs, but he can't tell you which ones, but he can let you know in 4 or 5 days, and that Russell Vogt is figuring out which ones. You remember Russell Vogt, the one he just put out a tweet just a couple days ago saying Russell Vogt of Project 2025 fame, the same Russell Vogt who was the director of the Office of Management and Budget, not just in this administration, but in his previous administration when he claimed the entire time he knew nothing about Project 2025. That Russell Vogt. Also on that note, he says that they're going to be able to cut billions of dollars of waste, fraud, and abuse, even though they found none when they did the entire Doge thing. And he says that all of that is being handed to him by Chuck Schumer on a silver platter. And then he says that there is no leadership in the U.S. And then he says that he's getting calls from Democrats that he's never heard from before, and that it reminds him of Somalia. That last bit about Somalia is especially weird because he's using it to reference Ilhan Omar when he says these Democrats who I have no idea who they are keep calling me, when he has every single opportunity mentioned Ilhan Omar. He definitely knows who she is, and he just wants to disparage her by saying that she's a Somalian refugee, which she is. And he, again, knows exactly who she is. That's why he's referencing her yet again, and even her country of origin. And finally, and this is actually the last thing he says, if Mark Carney is a great man and you guys are such good friends, how come you haven't made a deal? And Trump just goes, I want to be a great man too. He also wants to get into heaven. Don't forget about that. Wow, 10%ers. That was a doozy, wasn't it? Aren't you glad you took my advice and went and touched grass right at the beginning before I said anything? And for those of you who didn't, aren't you now going to take my advice in the future that maybe you should go touch some grass or pour yourself a stiff drink before you listen to me talk? Man, all of that, again, 35 minutes was all it took for him to say that. And Carney did talk for a little bit about that. So really, I have him at like 32 minutes of talking. And then if you take out reporters talking too, he said all of that in like 30 minutes of actual speech. Pretty wild, but I got it down to just over 9 minutes for you, and we're about to hit 10. So glad you were here. I appreciate you being here. I always appreciate everyone who stays and listens to what I have to say. And trust me, because I am not lying to you, I promise.